And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Dawg Talk podcast. I'm your host, Harris Marino. Alongside me, co-host Dan Kiley, Kobe Piers, back here with a post-CFP first-round action reaction. What a weekend of college football. We started it out with the cathedral of college football over there at Notre Dame Stadium. Man, was that a awesome environment. Then you followed up with three absolute great games. I guess really only one great game, if you will. The rest of them were really pretty decisive football, as I would say it around here. Gentlemen, how are we doing this wonderful Wednesday evening?
I'm doing extremely well. We just had the entire family over for Christmas. We usually do it on Christmas Eve, but obviously since it kind of falls in the middle of the week this year, it just worked out better today. So they just left. We had a great day over here. Really thankful for family, and what a great weekend of football. What a fun weekend because there was football on TV. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I agree. Great weekend. Four interesting games. I mean, we've been talking for years about an extended playoffs, about what it's going to be like having them own campuses for the host teams. A lot of firsts. If they said it once, they said it 100 times in the shoe. The first December game ever played, over and over again, which is cool. And you really saw, to me, the effect of when you let the northern teams host. It was cold. It was dang cold at a lot of them. My wife went to the Penn State game. We've all talked about that. It feels like 10 degrees with 20 mile an hour wind gusts. Like that. That's tough when you're SMU. You're from Dallas. You're used to it being 65 this time of year. Anytime you get down into the single digits, you really are feeling it.
And we saw it, especially on the field, not even just like you see their breath when they breathe and all that, and you see those effects. They got the heaters, they got the benches heated, all those nice amenities. But you saw it, especially in the special teams. And I know you two gentlemen are my special teams experts over here. We saw some shanked punts, which was really different than what we're used to. And I know not everybody has a Brett Thorson. I would like to see how Georgia would play in special teams in those situations, especially Penn State. Penn State went for it on like a 4th and 7, 4th and 11, in a normal situation where they probably would have kicked the field goal if it wasn't so damn cold.
Well, I know Kobe has experience putting his hands on an ice cold football, but let me tell you, the minute I saw them kick, I was like, they're kicking ice cubes. I mean, when those balls get cold, they get hard as a rock and they don't travel. The air in the ball is not the same. You have to have an incredibly strong leg to kick in cold weather. It's just not the same. And anybody that will try to tell you different, it's the same. It's not the same. Kicking an ice cold football is like kicking a freaking block of ice, and it hurts like hell. I remember we had a kicker that I knew a kicker that kicked barefoot, and he would kick barefoot in cold weather. And I'm like, you're out of your damn mind. I'm like, it hurts kicking through my Adidas shoe. Like, come on. There's no way in hell. But I know, Kobe, you have experience with it as well. When that ball gets ice cold, it's completely different.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the nice thing about this weekend is we really didn't have to see it a lot. There were no games that were close enough where, the pressure was on when they jogged out the kicker to kick a field goal. And so I feel like a lot of coaches just didn't even make that come up in the game plan. Penn State, the way they kind of even lingered there for a while, without the 2 pick sixes, I'm not sure they scored the whole first quarter into the second quarter. But like you're saying, they were willing to go for it 4th and long. They were not willing to jog the kicker out. I have to think Penn State maybe has to do with the gust of wind at 20 plus miles an hour. And then, I think we definitely saw that there wasn't a lot of need in kicking field goals, Ohio State versus Tennessee. It was not really a field goal kicking competition, if you will.
Yeah, that was a absolute boat race over there in Ohio. Let's start with that one. Let's start with the most recent one of them before we get into maybe the New Year games. I think that was the one that everybody was waiting for. I know sitting here watching the games, I was like, man, I'm just ready for Tennessee, Ohio State to get on. In full transparency, I had a 4-pick parlay for all the games this weekend, and I was correct up until Tennessee, Ohio State. So a lot of pressure riding on that game. I had Tennessee covering. Gentlemen, let's start there. Just general, like, how on a scale of 1 to 10, how shocked were you with how that game played out? Because I'm sitting at right about a 7.5 in terms of shocked at that result.
I'll let Kobe go first because I always go first. Tell me your thoughts.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say a 7's are probably a pretty good place. Knowing what I know now with Sampson going down and getting injured, I would say it maybe brings it down a little bit. But I mean, it's one of those wake up losses to me. If you're a Tennessee fan, a Tennessee coach, something you are doing is not, translating onto the field to the success on the field. I know you can't really just blow it up and do something completely different every one game, but in the big games, in the games against elite competition where their athletes are as good or better than your athletes, Tennessee does not win those games under Josh Heupel. And I think you kind of saw that last night. I mean, when there were better athletes on the field matching up against them, they couldn't run the ball. They couldn't win one-on-ones on the outside at receiver. They didn't tackle overly well. Man, Lord knows they didn't cover the Mbuka and JJ at all. I think I was very shocked. I mean, I thought that they could have at least made it a game, maybe still lost, but I think that anytime it's that big of a blowout, Ohio State had something to prove, and they proved it.
I was really excited to watch that football game. I thought it was going to be a very competitive football game. On the heels of Ohio State not playing well against Michigan, I knew that they were going to play better. And I think the one thing that we've all been saying, well, at least I know that I've been saying all year long, is that Ohio State's probably the most talented team in the country. They haven't always played up to their talent, but they do have the most talent. So I had an inkling, and, Harrison, we all talked about it, that Ohio State was going to play better. But I thought Tennessee had the ability to make it competitive because I felt like their defense was playing well, and I felt like they could run the football pretty well. And you're 100% right. When Sampson is not a part of the game plan, that completely changes what Tennessee is. And I think you bring up a good point where Josh Heupel is going to have to do some introspective looking here to figure out what it is that's missing, because he has the ability to score a lot of points, but it doesn't seem to travel, and it doesn't really travel to teams that are really highly ranked. So what is it that they're doing? Are they just beating up on teams that they're farly superior to? And how can they be more competitive with teams that are on equal footing? So I think he has a lot of questions to answer. I was very disappointed with the I won't say I'm disappointed with the outcome, although I'm just not a big Ohio State fan. I kind of wanted to see them lose because I'm not a fan of theirs, but I'm not necessarily a Tennessee fan. But just as a neutral observer, I expected to see a really good football game, and that's not what we got. So I was disappointed in that aspect. But you're right. There's a lot of questions to be answered for Tennessee. And then I think equally, there are a lot of questions that Ryan Day has to answer for. Because if you're capable of playing to that level, where was it all year long? And that's a question I feel like needs to be asked.
And I think that's a question, Dan, that I think maybe could be asked around college football. Because, I mean, really, when we think about teams that have played consistently good all year long, Oregon's the only one that I would argue has played at that same level outside of maybe the first 3 games. But with Ohio State itself, I'm with y'all there. I was intrigued by the matchup. As we've talked about on this show plenty of times, Georgia having faced Tennessee year over year over year, since I don't even know how long it's been since they haven't played in a year, especially under Josh Heupel. We know how challenging that offense is to match up against. It really stretches you vertically, horizontally. It does a lot of things. It utilizes every inch of that football field, and they do it, as Kobe said, at a high level most of the time. But when they do go up against somebody who matches their talent, or maybe even has a more talent, they struggle. And I think I saw this stat this morning, and actually I'm hoping it's correct because it does come for Bear Bryant's burner account. So excuse me if it's not. Nico finishes with 19 touchdowns this season. 15 of those, though, came against UTEP, Vandy, Mississippi State, NC State, Oklahoma, Chattanooga, and Tennessee. He combined for 4 touchdowns against Bama, Georgia, Florida, Arkansas, and Ohio State. All of those games outside of maybe Arkansas, Florida, well, outside of Arkansas, you could say Tennessee was on a similar skill level too. Now, this isn't Nico slander because in my mind, and I don't know about y'all, Nico played a really good football game, despite the passing game not being there, despite the running game not being there. Guys, I mean, Nico had to put on his Superman cape to claw his way to 10 points in that first half. I was impressed with him and what he was able to do because, like y'all have talked about, he was really limited. He didn't have his top running back. Deontay Thornton, his top receiver, went out. Squirrel White got hurt during the game. And I'm not making excuses for Tennessee. I'm just giving Nico credit for what he was able to do in that game.
I 100% agree. I mean, the man had his helmet cracked the first drive of the game, and he just wouldn't quit. I mean, we talked about it a week ago about how if you have the future of your program at quarterback, you're not wanting to run them more than maybe 5 times situationally in a game. I'd be curious to know. I would think he would probably have at least 15 runs, if not more, yesterday. And he was their offense. Like if they were going to have positive plays, if they were going to get to the sticks on like a 3rd and 2, it was going to be him kind of dropping back, scrambling, avoiding pressure, getting them 3 or 4 yards, and kind of keeping the drive going until eventually catching Ohio State maybe in a bad coverage or on a quick slant. But I felt like nothing down the field ever formed for them almost all night. Everything that they had success with was either quick slants, quick passes, or eventually him just having to run the ball. And that's just demoralizing. In the collegiate level, you want to be able to score quickly, big hitters, big momentum plays, kind of get it all going your way again. To have to march down the field over and over and over again, a lot of teams just can't do that at 70, 80 yards every time.
I mean, it was a tough ask for Nico to do it. And then you put on top of that the fact how uncomfortable he was being cold. And, they harped on that probably more than they needed to a little bit before the game, talking about how they stitched fleece line pockets inside of his jersey. They went on Amazon to buy super hot hand warmers, and then they bought extra stuff for his jacket, the inside of his jacket, to keep him warm on the bench. They were worried about him getting cold because they didn't want him to have to warm up. They wanted him to stay warm. They were really, really concerned about him getting cold because he couldn't handle it. And that's listen, if you've never – the kid's from Hawaii, right? That's where he's from, Hawaii. He's not used to that kind of stuff. And to put a kid in that environment, especially a young quarterback to begin with, you're asking him a lot going up an extremely talented team, and now he's got to deal with elements that he's never had to deal with before. And if you think about a lot of these quarterbacks in the South, all right, so it's the old argument, right? A lot of the teams in the South don't travel to play teams in the North in the second half of the season. They never have, and they never will. And, it's 1, we don't have to, and then 2, we don't want to. And a lot of these quarterbacks on Southern football teams are from the South, and they're not used to playing in that environment. And I can tell you as somebody who moved to Georgia from Sister Bay, Wisconsin, and if you know anything about that place, it's at the very tip of the peninsula of Wisconsin between Lake Green Bay and Lake Michigan. And we would have -30 weather in the wintertime. When I moved down here in Georgia, we moved right around Christmas time in 1986, and it was like 40-something degrees, and everybody down here was bundled up, as I am now. But, we came down here shorts and T-shirts like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. So weather is a factor that you can't take away. It's a real thing. And all the people who say, you have to be mentally tough, it's different. If you've never been in it, it's different. It was 22 degrees. It's not like it was 54. It was 22 degrees with a lower wind chill. You talked about what it was at Penn State. It was equally as cold there. So it's a real thing. It's absolutely a real thing. I think Nico did an extraordinary job given the circumstances. And that's just my take. And you don't have to agree with it. I just think based on everything he had to deal with, I think he did as well as you could possibly expect a young quarterback to do.
And I think Kobe brought this up, and it's a really interesting point because it's not just Kobe that said it from our perspective. It's also, I think I see Tennessee fans talking about it, even other fans talking about, analysts talking about, is this time to look in the mirror if you're Josh Heupel and ask the tough question? Are we getting the most out of the talent we have? Is it a talent problem? Is it a scheme problem? What is it? Because as Kobe said, when they run into these teams that are as talented as them or more talented, they're getting ran through like a buzzsaw. I mean, it wasn't long ago that we saw them go to Georgia, have a great first half. They had that surge in the first half. Then Georgia came out and whooped them from there on out. And I guess that was the first alarm bell for me. When Tennessee wasn't hot right out of the gate like they usually are, I was like, uh-oh. Tennessee's usually the one surging early. They're usually the one that surges early, then tail off at the end. Well, we didn't see that. Tennessee was cold as ice from the get-go offensively. Didn't play exceptionally defensively either, although they didn't get much help from their offense. But yeah, that was the one warning sign to me, early sign was, Tennessee doesn't look great out of the gate. And real quick, before we move on to the next games, guys, I think, and Kobe talked about this briefly, and Dan too, let's give Ohio State their credit. I certainly didn't have Will Howard playing out of his mind on my bingo card for the first round of the playoffs. I thought, like Dan said, Tennessee was going to be able to give them trouble up front with James Pierce and those guys. I thought their secondary was going to play a little bit better. And full credit to those guys, Emeka Egbuka, Jeremiah Smith. I mean, my God, was he just a terror on that field last night? I saw somebody, it was an ESPN draft analyst, saying, man, he reminds me of 2011 Julio. I'm like, man, that is a comp right there. But it's not the first time I've heard that comp for him. I mean, really an outstanding game from Ohio State's offense. Everything that could go their way went their way, outside of the interception that many argue is not an interception right in that end zone.
I had that foot down. I mean,
I did too.
Yeah. I'll say one thing about Jeremiah's comps, which is crazy. There are comps I feel like that you hear all the time for players in college. You're like, oh, he's the next this, he's the next this person. He is one of the very few that I believe. When they start talking and comparing him to people, it's like you are dead right. At 18, 19 years old as a true freshman, I think they quoted Heupel saying that they prepared for him like college Megatron. It's like, oh, I could see that. I could see that he is as dominant as Calvin Johnson probably was at Georgia Tech at the time. Julio Jones, I fully believe, being, what is he, 6'3", 6'4", 225. I mean, that's just hard for people to realize how big and massive that is. And to be as fast and as quick twitch as he still is just crazy.
I think when you loft comparisons on somebody like Calvin Johnson and Julio Jones, it's almost impossible to live up to those. But then you watch that guy play, and he is just such a physical specimen. And it's not that he's just faster, right? We've seen fast guys before. We've seen guys that have great catch radiuses before. We've seen guys who have great body control before. But it's usually one or maybe two of the three or four things that you need to be a great elite wide receiver, like Randy Moss, right? Randy Moss was faster than you. He was taller than you. He was stronger than you. He had better hands than you. Randy Moss was a freak of nature, and you didn't think you could see that again. And then you had Calvin. It's like every once in a while one of these guys comes by, and it's just hard to prepare yourself mentally for a freshman coming in and getting these lofty comparisons, because it happens so often that they lay these lofty comparisons on, and it's just absolutely ludicrous in some senses of the word. But when you watch him play, you're like, 100%, exactly what you guys said. They're spot on. I mean, the first one I heard was Amari Cooper, and I was like, okay, that's, whatever. But then now it's escalated, and I'll be damned if the kid isn't living up to the hype. I mean, and it's like impossible. Like he's just that damn good. He just is. He's incredible. I wish Georgia would have got him. Oh my God, I wish Georgia would have got him.
I think that's the prevailing sentiment over there on Twitter. Whenever I see him playing a primetime spot like that, it's like, man, what if Georgia could have got this kid in their building? Hey, Hayes Fawcett revealed a few weeks ago, right before signing, that he had an edit made up for Miami to flip Jeremiah Smith, or to land Jeremiah Smith right on signing day, and it ended up didn't happen, and he ended up over there at Ohio State. Gentlemen, from one blowout to the next, and Kobe, you touched on this one, so we'll stay in Big Ten country. I want your take on this. Dan, you, as much as anybody, have been calling out Penn State from the very beginning. Paper Tiger, I think, was your quote when we did the rankings a few weeks ago. What are your thoughts on Penn State? after yesterday's win?
My thoughts on Penn State is that they actually showed up and played a complete football game. That's probably as good. I understand who the opponent was. I'm not going to overreact that highly, but I'm telling you, they look like a real football team, and they look like they're going to be a tough team to beat. They ran the ball extremely well. They played good defense. Warren, I believe is his name, the tight end, number 44. He is – you can make fun of Penn State all you want to, but you can't make fun of that kid. That kid is a first-round tight end. I mean, he is going to be an elite-level tight end at the next level. He blocks well. He catches well. He runs well. He's smart. He's very creative. He was a quarterback in high school. He does everything. And I love the ESPN did a story on him a couple of weeks ago about when he came to Penn State, he said he will do anything they want him to do. And you just have to love a kid like that when you're extremely talented, you're hardworking, and you're willing to do whatever the team needs you to do. So I will pump my brakes on my shit talk for Penn State. They actually showed up, played a pretty decent football game, and they made SMU look really, really, really bad. And it's either you have to look at it one of two ways, and I'll let Kobe answer it. They either Penn State's really that good or SMU's that bad, or it's a combination of the two. I would like to know what Kobe's perspective on that is.
Yeah, I'm going to start out, though, like you're saying with the tight end, Tyler Warren, I'm pretty sure is his name. I think in 10 years from now, you're going to be having the conversations in the NFL. The kids will, we will, everybody, just like you've had with Gronk and Kelsey. Who's the better one? Who's better on the line? Who's better with the ball in their hands, catching touchdowns? I think you'll be having that conversation with him and Brock Bowers, 9 years from now. I think he's going to be a really good NFL tight end. I think he's going to be very similar to Brock, and you're going to be able to throw him the ball in space. You're going to be able to line him up in all these different packages and get him the ball. As far as SMU goes and Penn State, I think that things kind of just started rolling downhill for SMU quickly. I take it the first fourth down, it's 4th and 1. And it's just the difference between having been in these situations before, playing in big games before, and not. And it's not a knock, but it's just a mental error where quarterback rolls out to the right. He has it. I mean, if he runs, he has the first down. It's 4th and 1. He pulls the ball up to a wide open tight end and throws it offline just a little bit. Safety makes a nice tackle, dislodges the ball. It's a turnover on downs. Being just a little greedy, going for the jugular instead of just, hey, death by 1,000 cuts, man. We're going to come in here. We're going to run the ball. We're going to play a low-scoring football game. We're going to try to sneak out of here with a win. Get that first down. Give yourself 4 more downs to kind of decide what you're going to do. Maybe you bust one the very next play. It was a big stand from Penn State. And then, like you're saying, I mean, the first pick six, not a lot you can do about it. The second one, you got to get the man on the ground. He returned it like 45, 50 yards. Somebody's got to get that man on the ground, make him go earn it on offense, give your defense a chance. But when you spot a team basically 21 with turnovers like that, plus he just didn't look as good. Like you're saying, it looked like the lights were a little bright for SMU from top down at coach, at quarterback, on defense. It just looked like they didn't quite have an answer. And when things started not going their way, things really started not going their way. And kudos to Penn State for capitalizing. They put the foot down and they left no doubt, even after a pretty slow start. I mean, like you're saying, they couldn't move the ball the first quarter at all. It really took into the second quarter before they kind of found their rhythm running the ball.
And in terms of, like you said, they found the gas. They found the gas in the second half. They put the game away. They didn't let SMU linger around. I was kind of waiting to see if we were going to see an SMU spark at some point in that game where they give a little life, and they really didn't show it till it was too late. They got that touchdown right near the end of the game, but we'll give Penn State credit. I'm a little shocked. I thought Dan may come on here and maybe critique him a little bit more than he ended up doing. So I'm shocked by that answer, Dan. I thought maybe with kind of how pedestrian of the first half offensively they were,
I'll give you what you want. Their quarterback is not an elite quarterback, and they don't have elite wide receivers. So there are things, okay? If you wanted to really chew apart Penn State, you can do it. But their running game was good. Their defense was good. They Kobe?
They remind me of 2017 Georgia. They have two really good running backs. They have a really good defense. They're not elite at quarterback, and they're not elite at wide receiver.
Yep, and that's exactly the way that I saw it. But I was trying to be positive. Harrison wanted Evil Dan to come out, so there you go. They're not an elite offense. They're just a really good running offense.
I wanted Southern Dan, not Wisconsin Dan, not Big Ten Dan.
Like you're saying, though, I mean, just because you don't have an elite wide receiver group or elite quarterback doesn't mean you're a bad football team. I mean, 2017
Georgia doesn't
Georgia
have elite
played,
wide receivers.
Yeah. It doesn't mean you can't play for a national championship. It just means that if somebody has an answer for the run game, you're going to be extremely limited. If you have to play from behind, you're going to be extremely limited. I think that's been an Achilles heel of James Franklin his whole career, honestly. If they can't run the ball, if they have to play from behind, Penn State has never done well under Franklin. That's just kind of how it is.
And without jumping into the previews, and I guess this is a great time to go ahead and weave in that announcement. We will not have a show on Christmas Day, Wednesday. We will be back here next week, next Sunday, same time, same place, previewing all 4 of the second round games and talking about, or not the quarterfinal games. We'll preview all of them next week at 7:30, but not jump before, I don't want to get ahead of us and take away that little preview, but I guess my general thoughts from this Penn State one, as y'all so well how great y'all articulated it. It's going to take stopping the run and forcing them to beat you through the air to have Penn State maybe drop a game. I don't see a team that can do it until the semifinal. I don't think Boise State's going to be able to challenge them, just like Penn State wasn't. Now, Boise State may not leave this game up in the hands of their quarterback so much. They're not so much of a quarterback-centric offense. They're obviously going to put it on the ground and try and run it with Ashton Genty. But if that doesn't work, we know Penn State's good enough to get after them and to give them problems and to shut that offense down. Just me. After Saturday, I guess my general takeaway will be Penn State's going to make it to the semifinal unless all hell breaks loose next weekend or in a week from now, over a week from now. Gentlemen, let's go from the south, or let's go from the north. We'll stick in the north. Sorry. We got to save that one for last since that is Notre Dame. Let's go to the south. Texas defeats Clemson 38-24. Kobe, you predicted Clemson to win this game on our preview show. So I'm going to give you the floor to start it off. Give us Kobe Pierre's general takeaways from that game.
Yeah, highly disappointed in Clemson's ability to strike blockers and stop the run. I mean, that's what it comes down to, right? Like, Clemson played pretty well offensively. They scored at times, but when it came to, hey, it's 3rd and 3, they gave up big runs that Georgia, the whole, like we've talked about in the past, the game plan that Georgia had and executed against Texas was stop the run, make them throw the ball to beat you. Now, Quinn threw the ball all over the yard against us between the 20s in the SEC championship game. But when they got to the red zone, when they needed the scores, when they needed to run the ball, when they needed to run arch, they couldn't run at all. They were running at like 1.2, 1.3 yards a clip. They were running like 7 yards a run against Clemson. Whether it was and it just was hard. I knew when they were having trouble stopping the run in the first and second quarter, it was going to be a long second half. Sark's doing a good job building that Texas team to be a 4-quarter football team, kind of like in Alabama, Georgia, an Ohio State, somebody that's big and physical up front. And they really had their way with Clemson in the second half. That was a big run when Clemson brought it within 7 to basically give up I think it was 84-yard run right out the gate to Blue. It was over at that point.
Kobe, I just want to jump in real quick before we go to Dan, because I like this point from Pappy Trappy. Kate Klubnik, I want to give him his flowers. Dan, I said on the preview show that I didn't think Clemson had the horses to keep up with Texas offensively. And obviously Texas did a good job of suppressing them for much of that game. Texas played on their terms and executed on both sides of the ball pretty well. But Kate Klubnik and that offense gave Texas a little bit of a scare there in the second half. And after, I think, spending the last few years talking about how Clemson doesn't have playmakers on the outside at receiver. I think we saw some of those guys show up and make some big time catches, make some big time plays when Clemson was trying to get back into this football game.
The one takeaway that I have is, who knew that all he needed was just to go play a game in Texas to turn into the 5-star quarterback that everybody thought he was going to be, because he had the absolute best game of his entire life, and he kept Clemson in the game. I was 100% on the other side. I thought this was going to be straight belt to ass. I thought Texas was going to be playing with an edge to them to absolutely beat the hell out of Clemson. Because to be completely honest, Clemson hasn't been impressive all year long. In any of their wins, especially not in their losses. I mean, there's a difference between a good win and a bad loss, right? And like even in their losses, they didn't look impressive, because that can happen. You can lose a game and still look good. But they just haven't looked overly impressive at any point this year. And then they come out and play their best game of the year against Texas. And I don't know what that says about Texas, really, because Texas hasn't played a good team other than Georgia, and they lost twice to them. So, I try to watch the games and have fun. I don't try to watch the game as an analyst, because I don't get paid to do that. But part of you, when you're watching the game, you're trying to figure things out, right? I guess it's just a natural thing. You're trying to figure things out. And I come out of that game more freaking confused about football than I've ever been in my entire life, because I fully expected to see Texas just overpower them with the weapons that they have, with the defense they have. All year long, we've been throwing flowers at Texas, talking about they're the best defense in the country. They did not look like the best defense in the country against Clemson. They absolutely shredded them apart at times. Now, granted, they got the win. They won by double digits. At the end of the day, Kirby would tell you it's a win. We're on in the next week. We'll break down, blah, 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 all that bull crap. But I expected a much better performance from Texas. And maybe I'm wrong. I mean, you guys are allowed to have your opinions. Everybody's allowed to have their opinions. I just expected more out of Texas, and I didn't get it.
I'm kind of with you there. I thought Texas was going to be able to put them away kind of early there. I mean, you talk about being what? They were able to go up. They were about to go up 21-0, if I believe it was correct. And I forget exactly what happened. They missed. I think it was the fourth down.
Didn't Clemson score on the first drive?
Oh yeah, you're right. What was it? What was I thinking of? It was the pick. They were going to be able to go up 28-7 and kind of put that game in hand. And then Clemson goes down after the interception, gets a field goal, and it's a two-score ball game for a minute. And then Texas goes down and score right before the half. But yeah, I'm kind of with you, Dan. I thought Texas was going to handle them, make it a little bit more decisive, not to take credit away from Texas and their performance. Really impressive display on the ground. That's the one thing that I guess is interesting to me. Texas has been able to run the ball pretty well all year long up until they faced Georgia. And we've had a lot of conversation in this podcast about how, obviously this Georgia defense isn't as good as the one they've had previously when they've won national titles. And Georgia has struggled in some games against the run. But when you see Texas when you go to Texas, Georgia stopped the run, held them 29 yards. You get SEC championship. Texas had under 30 yards again. Like, what is it about Georgia that gives Texas so many problems in the run game? And, I mean, maybe it's just me, but I thought Clemson has just as good a personnel maybe up front as Georgia did to be able to, kind of make this more of a one-dimensional showing from Texas and Steve Sarkisian.
I think that's a great point you bring up about the Georgia defense, because leading into Georgia-Texas Part 2, the SEC championship game, and I don't remember which ESPN analyst it was, but they came on to 680 The Fan, and they did a whole segment on, if you want to give Georgia a hard time, you have to have a quarterback that runs the ball, whatever. But if you are a standard traditional run offense that runs it in a traditional sense, that Georgia is going to stop you. That is what Georgia is designed to do, and they are best at is defending a traditional run offense. And Texas is a traditional run offense. That's why a lot of people anticipated that Arch Manning would have a bigger role in the second game, and he might if they ever play a third time. But Georgia is built to stop that run, right? And so people try to say, well, because Texas couldn't run against Georgia, that the same thing will be against Clemson. But people have been able to run on Clemson. It's not apples to apples. Georgia was built to do a specific thing, and they're like we have talked all year long about. Georgia is not as elite as they have been in certain areas, but against a traditional run offense, Georgia is elite. And all these teams that we're looking at right now, and maybe it was just because of the cold weather, but a lot of these teams were traditional run teams this weekend. And if you watch the games and you saw what these teams were trying to do, outside of Ohio State, who can throw the ball all over the place, there really wasn't a team that scares you, because what they do well is what Georgia's good at stopping. So I think that's a great point you bring up about Texas running the ball.
Yeah, and just one more thing, kind of to follow what you said, Harrison, and then we'll kind of move on to our game that matters. I agree. I think that up front, man-to-man on the D-line, Clemson is very similar to Georgia. They have some really good talent up front. I think where the fall-off happens is at the linebacker and safety position. I think that is where Clemson struggled stopping the run, whether it be eye discipline, getting bumped out of your gap, missing the tackle, taking a bad angle. Those are the things that you just don't realize in big games, the big plays that happen by guys with a lot of experience, by guys that have been there, the way you practice, the way you play in a game. This is not a dig. It's just a equal level of comparison. Part of the reason Sammy Brown went to Clemson is because he saw a road for playing time as a true freshman. He has gotten a ton of playing time as a true freshman. It is going to benefit Sammy Brown at this level next year into the next level. Very happy for him. But there's a reason that Chris Cole isn't playing as much. He's still getting some run, but against Texas, you're running guys that are juniors and seniors and sophomores, people that have been in this program for years, that have the strength of, they're grown men. And sometimes it takes actual grown men to do their job and to do it well enough to stop a team like Texas, because they're running grown man football at you. We're running power, pin pull concepts, pulling guards, pulling tackles, kick out blocks, the whole gamut at you. And they're just seeing, are you willing to run down and throw your head in the wall 20 times? Because the one time you're not, Blue's taking it 78 yards. See ya. So I think Clemson, as long as they just don't get shredded by the portal, I've already seen that Dabo's taken a couple guys this year. So I think they will be back eventually. I think the ACC is very easy to kind of turn into Clemson's conference again. I mean, they already won it this year on a down year.
Dog water.
Yeah. It was a bad look for the ACC this weekend. That'll be kind of how I leave it to Harry.
Yeah, I mean, you have two decisive losses, and Clemson came back and made a little bit of a game there, made it interesting there at the end. But I like your point, Kobe. We're seeing Dabo finally evolve. He's not the get off my lawn, I'm not taking any more any portal guys. He's finally going to the portal. Now, I do love how he went and took a non-G5 player out of the portal of his first.
They said he was the number one player in the portal. Is that true?
He may have been
number one defender in the portal.
Ah. Okay.
And
then he went and got a guy from Purdue that's one of the top edge rushers in the portal. I don't know how to say his last name, so I won't butcher it here. So we're starting to see Dabo evolve on that front. And then to kind of, before we wrap it up on Clemson, move into the Notre Dame Indiana discussion. Kobe, I like what you said there. Clemson will be back. Now, will they have the pieces will they add the pieces from the portal that take them from a first-round loss to a national championship contender next year? We'll wait and see. But I tell you what, you have a true sophomore in Antonio Williams at wide receiver, had a good game versus Texas, and you have a true freshman in Bryant Wesco Jr. That played decently in that game versus Texas. They have two receivers, something they've been sorely missing on the outside that can give teams trouble. They haven't had a difference maker since a T. Higgins, since, the guy that played for the Chiefs that got hurt.
Justin Ross.
Justin Ross. They haven't had those guys. And we'll still wait and see if Antonio Williams and Bryant Wesco turn into those guys. But it does seem like, especially with them going to the portal now, they can start building on the foundation they already have. Because Dabo's still recruiting very well. Clemson's still recruiting out of high school at a very high level. They just haven't been able to put the cherry on top like all these other college programs have, because Dabo says, hey, I ain't taking portal guys.
My last point on Clemson is we have to see him win without a general back. He hasn't done that yet.
Yeah. So, gentlemen, let's talk Notre Dame. Obviously, we are saving the general preview of the Georgia Notre Dame matchup. 44 years later, meeting again in the Sugar Bowl. A national title is not on the line, but a trip to a potential national title is on the line. Gentlemen, my biggest takeaway from this, and this is where this discussion will center around, and I think I texted Dan about this. Notre Dame did to Indiana what Notre Dame used to have done to them. Like, who would have thought 5 years ago you'd be coming here, you'd be watching in your living room, wherever you were, you're watching a college football playoff game, which Notre Dame's in, and they're having a strength of schedule discussion and how there's just disparity between the team that has a lower strength of schedule and the one that has a little bit higher. And it wouldn't, the conversation wouldn't center around Notre Dame being the victim of a poor schedule. I didn't see 5 years ago. You tell me that, I would have been like, "You're high, not real, not going to happen." But that's exactly what happened here. Notre Dame completely dominated Indiana up front, and I mean, shoot, that was a pack of Signettis they were smoking out there for 4 quarters.
Actually, you sent that to our group chat, and you said, "My brief general takeaways: Notre Dame did to Indiana what teams used to do to them." Oh, okay. I guess that's how you said. Never mind. But anyway, I didn't want to read the rest of it. It's all right. So here's my takeaways from the overall game. Okay, is Notre Dame is one of the most beautiful places on earth. It showed extremely well on night. That crowd was extremely motivated. They didn't sell their tickets to everybody else. They had a great electric atmosphere. Notre Dame was extremely fired up to play that football game, and they looked extremely dominant against a shitty-ass football team. And that's the takeaway, is all those things can be true. Notre Dame's absolutely beautiful. Those fans were fired up, and that place was electric, and Notre Dame was ready to play. The only problem is Bishop Sycamore was on the other sideline. So there's hard to have a serious takeaway on that game because Indiana was so in over their head. They were so clearly not supposed to be there that I guess you have to give credit to Notre Dame for beating the hell out of somebody when you're supposed to. And I don't care about the end of the game. The end of the game, Notre Dame had a bunch of reserves in. Marcus Freeman took everybody out of the football game. Go look at the numbers. If you think I'm full of shit, go look at the numbers on the defensive line. Go look at the numbers in the secondary. They were all new guys, clean uniforms. He emptied the bench. He was not about to get somebody hurt at the end of that football game, which is a smart move by a coach. They gave up points at the end of the game. Does not matter because it doesn't change your ranking. All you have to do is win the football game. And when their starters were in the game, you have to give them credit. They were motivated to play, and they beat the hell out of somebody like they were supposed to. That was like mid-'80s Boston Celtics going up against the freaking Globetrotters. I mean, it was just insane.
Yeah, I think what amazes me is the coaching change at Notre Dame has finally caught up to their team and is paying off for them. And I think that's something that I saw years ago with Kelly being their head coach, is that he just didn't really take it seriously. He always had an excuse. I mean, it definitely kind of still rings true at LSU, but it seems like he always has some reason that they didn't play as well as they should have, or some reason that they weren't executing the way they should have. And he doesn't always look in the mirror. I think you've seen that at LSU when he's lost a couple of these early season games. He's like, we're talking about this again. We're doing this again. Why are we doing this again? It's like, well, coach, you've had all offseason to practice, prepare, get your guys ready. And I think Freeman had his guys ready to go at night, first playoff game of the year against a team that you either love them or you hate them in Indiana, a team that you could argue didn't belong there at all. Alabama fans were just having their way on Twitter on Friday night saying, would this game be the same way if it was a Crimson Tide across from Notre Dame? But like you're saying, kudos to Notre Dame. They took care of business. And I think, like you're saying, they ran the ball extremely well. They were physical. They passed the ball when they needed to. They played shutdown defense. And man, they have got the media on their hype train. I'm not sure that I've seen a single media member say that they're losing in the Sugar Bowl to Georgia, which is amazing how quickly it can all just kind of change on you all of a sudden. Where Notre Dame, they're like, oh, we'll see how they do against Indiana. They'll probably, survive. And all of a sudden it's like people are chomping at the bit saying they're the team coming out the south of the bracket. It's unbelievable how quickly things change.
The one thing I will piggyback on some of the comments here is that one of the things for me with Marcus Freeman is early in his head coaching career, and you can parallel this with Kirby Smart as well, because early in their coaching career, they made inexplicably dumb decisions. And, you can call a spade a spade. I mean, we all love Kirby Smart here. Nobody's trying to shit on Kirby Smart, but there were decisions that he made that just didn't resonate. Like, I don't even know the word I'm looking for. Just were asinine. You're like, what are you doing? Like, that didn't even make sense. And same with Marcus Freeman. Early in his coaching career, what in the hell are we doing? I don't know. Anyway, Marcus Freeman is learned from his mistakes, and I think that is a mark of a mature and a good football coach is learning from your mistakes. I think he's done a good job of building that team. And I welcome the challenge. Hey, listen, if they really think that they're going to come down to the Sugar Bowl and just walk out with a W, then kudos to them. I just, for some reason, I feel like Carson Beck is just an insurmountable loss that Georgia can't overcome. And maybe they're right. Ultimately, maybe they're right, but it won't be against Notre Dame. If we lose that game, it won't be because of quarterback play. I can promise you that.
That's the one interesting topic about all of this is for the last few years, it has been yelled at and screamed at Georgia fans that Georgia, and this wasn't their exact wording. I'll give you the exact wording in a moment. Everybody told Georgia fans that Georgia wasn't a quarterback-centered offense. They won 2 national titles in spite of their quarterback, according to some rival fans. And now times have changed. Everyone's coming out, and like Kobe said, like Dan has said, people are predicting Notre Dame to win because Georgia doesn't have their quarterback. I don't know about y'all, and this isn't taking anything away from Carson Beck, but I don't think Georgia's success rides on the shoulders of one guy. Georgia hasn't played their best with Carson Beck in the lineup. They haven't played their best with him, without him in the lineup. So, to think, hey, one card falls, the house of the cards all fall down with them. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think we see Georgia resort back to kind of what they did before Stetson Bennett was in at quarterback and won them 2 national titles. I think we see them become more of a run-focused, play with your defense, lean on your defense to play, to win football games. Now, does that work against Notre Dame? We'll find out very soon. But I think the game plan in terms of Georgia, without diving too much into the preview here, is I think with Gunnar Stockton at quarterback, I think these two offenses will resemble each other. Riley Leonard is not this some non-mobile quarterback like y'all talked about in regards to Quinn Ewers. He has some juice to him. He has the ability to have the design quarterback run game. We saw a little bit of that versus Notre Dame or versus Indiana. We didn't see much of that. When you go and watch the regular season, you see that a lot more when you watch Riley Leonard. But I think styles make fights, and we're going to hear that over and over and over again. The question in regards to this matchup is going to be, well, which style wins it and who can play that style is what I'm really interested to see. We saw Notre Dame can win a game in a rock fight. Although this really wasn't much of a rock fight. It was more like Notre Dame was throwing snowballs or Indiana was throwing snowballs and Notre Dame had rocks. Because whatever Indiana was doing was not working, Kobe. Did not work. And that's the thing. I want to touch on this because I loved how y'all talked about the non-mobile quarterbacks and how, Georgia's able to take advantage of those guys more so than the mobile quarterbacks. Well, look what Notre Dame did. That was the discussion pregame, Kobe, was Indiana's quarterback doesn't have any juice to him with his legs. He is a statue, a pocket passer, and that's what he does. That's how he has to be successful. And they finally ran into a team that was able to take advantage of them up front, was able to cover them out wide, and they had no answers.
I think the thing that I've been thinking about most, and I think it's always just a wonderful blessing to have, is I know at the beginning of the year, Kirby, so I guess Alabama would have been a loss, Florida would have been a win. So I think Kirby in the regular season is now 9-2, coming off of more than 7 days to prepare for a game. And I guess if you were to extend that into the postseason, you could say, if it was 9, then 10 would be Liberty. You'd have one extra loss in against Texas. But I mean, the man's like 12-3, 13-3 when having more than a week to prepare for your team. And you can believe what the media says. You can believe what Kirby will tell you, Harrison, tomorrow when you're able to ask him some questions. They've been preparing for Notre Dame all week. If you turn on the tape, if you watched Notre Dame play and Indiana play like they have, they knew going into that game what was going to be happening. They've already been breaking down Notre Dame stuff for more than a week. So I will be amazed if we do not have a very solid, sound defensive game plan on how to stop the run and how to contain the quarterback. He is mobile. I think he's more situationally mobile than maybe some of the guys that have burned us in the past. I think if we don't keep solid rush lanes or, maybe don't spy Jalen Walker, there could be some issues. But I just think that unlike guys in the past, if you do end up spying a Jalen Walker, he's not going to outrun Jalen anywhere, where that has, I feel like, been more of a threat against other mobile guys like a Jalen Milroe, where this guy's running 4.4.
I think the one thing that he does have going for him is he's a big guy. He's not little. I mean, like,
he's a unit.
When they would zoom in on him, if you ever, this is going to sound really weird, but if you're ever in the talent evaluation, or if you're just an athlete in general, you can always tell, like, a great athlete is built in the waist, in the core area, and then the butt and the legs, right? They're well built in those areas. You're not going to find a great athlete that's not well put together in that area of the body. And he is just, he is a unit. He is a strong guy. And I think that is going to give him the ability to hold up against this Georgia football team, because Georgia's going to hit him. They're going to hit him hard. And, there are some of these quarterbacks that are extremely talented that I wonder, are they going to be able to hold up to that pounding that Georgia's going to put on them? Because make no mistake about it, part of Georgia's game plan is going to get that kid on his back and to have him looking up from the ground all night long, because he can spin it. He can throw it. He can put that ball, and then it's going to be in a environment where weather is not a factor. They're inside of a dome. Notre Dame does have a little bit of speed on the outside. I can't remember his name, number 6. Their wide receiver who had
Jordan Faison.
Faison.
Yeah, Faison.
He was good. Could we just call a spade a spade? He had a really good game, and and Leonard Skinner put the ball on the mark more times than not. And then I think you bring up a really good point, Kobe, about situationally athletic, right? Where I don't think that they really want him to be a huge factor in the run game, but they do slide some in there. Charlie Weiss Jr. has done a really good job. That's the offense coordinator, Charlie Weiss Jr., right? Or is he not there? He's somewhere else. No, he's not there. He's somewhere else. He's
at Ole Miss.
Ole Miss, that's right. Yeah. I just totally fucked that up. Excuse me. It's the
language.
Guy. I know, right?
I think it's Mike Denbrock was their OC.
Yeah, well, whoever the offensive coordinator is, that's my fault. I got Charlie Weiss in the brain because he was a coach there, and it just threw me for a loop. But he's doing a good job with that offense. But like you said, when Georgia has the ability to prepare for you, and I think Kobe hit the nail directly square on the head when Georgia has been preparing for Notre Dame. I doubt very high. I'm sure they glanced at Indiana, and they probably said, hey, if we play Indiana, look for these couple things. By the way, here's Notre Dame tape, and just focus on this. But, and the other part of that too, and this is curious, and I know it's a dangerous game to play, but I wonder how Notre Dame was actually peering in on Georgia stuff and kind of looking past Indiana? Because you don't think so at all? I mean, you don't think they had a couple coaches just
I would doubt it. You haven't won big enough games on that stage before to be looking ahead yet. I mean, like you're saying, they may have some analysts that were looking, but I mean, very, very little game planning was going into Georgia. You had to win that game first. That's the perk of having the bye.
Yeah.
And I worry we lost Dan on my screen.
I think we did too. We'll give him a moment. But yeah, Kobe, you hit it spot on there. It's usually the analysts doing the work. They're in the lead up. Like they're always working, I think, a week or two ahead of where the team's at in terms of opponents. So I'm sure, when Notre Dame got back in that building, when their coaches got back in their building, as Kobe has to get the dog in order down there. When those coaches got back in that building, I'm sure they had like a stat sheet or something, just like a brief rundown of, hey, here's the analytics around Georgia. Here's what Georgia is. And those coaches were ready to go. Dan, we got you back here. Are you all good?
No, I don't have a great internet connection right now, so it's probably going to be shit the rest of the night. But
hey, we're almost done. So hey, it went out at the right time, I guess.
Yeah, I guess my overall takeaway on that game, and I think I'll just stop talking about this game after that, is just Notre Dame did exactly what they were supposed to do, and you have to give a team credit for doing that.
I mean, yeah. Considering I came on the show, I think it was last Sunday or last Wednesday, and said the most Notre Dame thing ever would be to lose this game. Dan's spot on with that. You're both spot on with that. Dan didn't get that reference. Well, he knows that, but he came at it from a different perspective in terms of he saw Notre Dame at its peak growing up. Whereas I've only seen Notre Dame, as the team that gets the crap beat out of them by Alabama in a national championship game.
As they've been the butt of the joke in our lifetimes.
Yeah.
More times than not. What was the record there? I think until this game, like in postseason games, they haven't won in the postseason in like 13 seasons. I mean, something crazy.
It's been a while, and that's what like y'all have said. I want to give Marcus Freeman credit because he's turning them into a serious, I guess, playoff contender in the sense of like, hey, they're not this pushover. They're not They're actually kind of somewhat of an attractive proposition again on the recruiting trail because of the energy and the charisma he brings on the trail. He's much different from Brian Kelly.
So let me defend Notre Dame in one instance. You guys like to kind of make a joke about them not being competitive in a lot of those bowl games and stuff. Well, part of the issue was that Notre Dame is such a big brand that these bowl games wanted Notre Dame to be a part of it because it would boost up their ratings and boost up the revenue. So they were asked to participate in bowls and games that they were probably not prepared or qualified to be in. Their name recognition and brand. I mean, if you're going back before during the BCS era where only number 1 and number 2 played, they would get into a Sugar Bowl or they would get into whatever the case may be, they would get into one of these games they probably shouldn't have been in just because that bowl wanted that brand. So, for years they were playing in games that they were over their head in, and that absolutely contributed to that bad bowl record.
And they're a little bit better than I thought. Well, I'll rattle out some for you just real quick. Since the BCS National Championship, lost to Alabama, they come back the next year and they beat Rutgers in the Pinstripe Bowl. They beat LSU in the Music City Bowl, get beat pretty bad by Ohio State in the Fiesta Bowl. They win a Citrus Bowl against LSU. They get embarrassed in a Cotton Bowl in the playoffs against Clemson. They get embarrassed in a Rose Bowl against Alabama in the playoffs. They lose a close one to Oklahoma State in a Fiesta Bowl. Then last year they beat 2 years ago they beat South Carolina. Last year they beat Oregon State, and then they won this year against Indiana. So kind of maybe some up and up for Marcus Freeman in the postseason.
Yeah, I'm excited to see this next slate of games. I guess just kind of wrapping up the first round, putting a bow on top. Gentlemen, before we do move on, I did want to throw this in there because there's a lot of conversation about this. Real quick, we'll go, I'll give each of y'all a chance to just give one pro, one con about the first round. That con could be something you didn't like, something you can change. Let's just give our general takeaways on this new playoff format before we wrap up tonight's show.
My one pro is there was football to watch. My one con is that 4 of the teams were absolutely horseshit. So we probably should just have an 8-team playoff and be done with it. But I guess, like I said, my pro is that there was football to watch, and I'll take football to watch it any day of the week.
My pro is 100% games on campus. Postseason games on campus, I loved. Love to see the atmosphere. Love to see how people kind of reacted to it, and it really felt. I mean, 4-0 for the home team. It showed that your record mattered. What you did in the regular season mattered. You know, having those important wins allowed for home field advantage, and it's something I think we saw in the regular season too. You look at some of the big losses on the year, and not many of the teams across all of college football took those at home. Almost all of them that I can think of came on the road, and it kind of, stayed the same. I would say the biggest con is that the field's just too big, and it was apparent to me on Friday and Saturday night that the field was too big. I think that 8 is definitely somewhere you could look. I would argue that 6 would be a number I would be happier with. I think the top 6 teams in college football, you give the number 1 and the number 2 seed a bye. You have 3 play 6, 4 play 5 at home, just like they did this weekend, and then you go into bowl sites for the second round, and then eventually national championship game. It would give you more teams in, that 5-6 team, maybe a late loss in a season. But I think you would have better football. What would it have been this year? It would have been Oregon, Georgia, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Penn State, I think, something like that. Texas. I think that would have been your 6. So I think after watching on this weekend, I think those are your best 6 teams in all of college football. So.
Yeah. Just to go off that, I'm with y'all on that. Home playoff games, amazing. The atmospheres were awesome. The fact we had a football on this weekend, meaningful football. Not that all bowl games are, well, they make them somewhat meaningless with the opt-outs. Although this year it seems like opt-outs are going down. I'm with y'all there. In terms of con, we got to change the format here. I'm not for expansion, never have been. Wasn't really excited about moving to 12 teams. It wasn't until Georgia kind of had a 2-loss season. We're like, man, expansion helped Georgia out a little bit in this sense. But my con is we got to figure out some material. We got to figure out some rubric in how we do what we do in college football in terms of rankings. It is tiresome because every year we come back to the same point of we aren't ranking these teams the correct way, or there's no criteria for how we do things. Everything's, not equal. 11-2 for Indiana's not 11-2 for Georgia. They aren't created equal. Our schedules aren't created equal. We got to figure something out because I think there is, as Dan has pointed out, there's doing something that's good for the product, and then there's just doing something that's good because, hey, whatever, we're just going to do it anyways and please people. I think we saw the latter in terms of, hey, we want to please the expansion crowd, but we also want to please the crowd that says, oh, we're seeing the same 4 teams every year. Well, let me break it to you. I hate to break it to you. You're most likely going to see a repeat contender in this format because you're going to have a battle-tested Georgia team that has 2 losses get into the playoffs and keep their season alive, And you may have a 1-loss Boise State get in because they had that hell of a season. But usually 9 times out of 10, Georgia's going to win in that matchup. There are no Cinderella stories in football. Football is I think, in my opinion, and y'all may disagree with this, and that's fine. Football is the sport that is most dependent upon the Jimmies and Joes more than any other sport that I can think of. This is a team sport. All 11 guys, and this cliche, have to contribute. And if you have the Jimmies and the Joes, they're going to far outweigh the X's and the O's over there. Sorry, Dan Mullen.
Yeah, I think I agree with you because it's the one sport that is so finite of how good are you this day on the field. I think you can get a team that's hot and kind of streaky in basketball or baseball or something. They can go on a run or kind of fix things if, maybe you lose game 1 of a series or game 2 of a series. Football is not that way. We were talking about last year against Alabama in the SEC championship game. You're undefeated all year. Have you been perfect? No, but you go out and you probably play your worst game of the season. You lose by 3 and you get bumped from the playoff completely. When you look at it that way, that is what makes it so great is in the end, it all came down to it was a 1-game season. You lose and you're out. And, I think the expansion helps build on that. Maybe that game isn't quite that important anymore, which I agree. Maybe 1 game shouldn't define your entire season until the last one. But like you're saying, I think that there's a sweet spot, and I think that sweet spot is going to be between 6 and 8, kind of consistently throughout the years. I just worry that anything past there, you just get into these teams that are so flawed. And could Ole Miss get hot and have gone on a run and won it all? Definitely. But I guess at some point, did they deserve it? Did they do the things in the regular season to deserve that chance? No, they didn't.
I agree 100%. Like and I think Kirk Herbstreit made a great point when they brought him on at the conclusion of the last game. They said that now all the games are done. What is your takeaway? He said, I hope that these games show the committee that you cannot just what's the word I'm looking for? Placate to the casual people in the country that just want all the people who deserve it because they won games. He said it's archaic to look at teams based solely on their wins, and it's more important not how many games you've won. While winning is always important, is what he said. Who you have beaten is far more important. And I think if that metric or if that decision making would have taken place, SMU doesn't get in. And then the other thing is the automatic bids. They have to go away. You can't do it because it's just not right. I mean, so this is one of the best takeaways that I've heard so far. And just stay with me for 1 second, okay? So the 2 teams that won their conferences, Oregon and Georgia, are rewarded in the second round with playing Notre Dame and Ohio State. The 2 teams who got automatic bids from bullshit conferences, they get Penn State and what's the other team?
Texas.
Like it's kind of crazy, right? Like Oregon is the best team in the country, and they have to play Ohio State for the first game. Like that's asinine. And it's brackets have been around forever. We've got to do better, man. I mean, it was poorly conceived. That's all.
I guess my thing is, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that the auto bids are fine. The auto bids guaranteeing you one of the top 4 spots in the bye is the issue. If you want to hey, if you're a conference champion, you're in. You're going to be the 12th seed. You're going to go to Ohio State at night in the cold and get that ass whooped a little bit. But you're in. You get to hang the banner and say, we made it. But
we're in.
I agree. For Arizona State to say that they got to sit at home this week and not have to go prove it, to me, how much better of a game would have been to have seen Boise State versus SMU this round, or Indiana versus a Boise State, or even Arizona State. Those are the games, like you're saying, are gonna help be more competitive early on in those teams that were kind of more your bubble teams versus teams that have kind of proven that they belong. Hate it for a team like a Boise State who's done all they can. But at the end of the day, them, SMU, Indiana, I don't think any of the 3 of them, even Clemson maybe, and I picked Clemson because I liked them, but they didn't have a legitimate chance. Even if you upset a Notre Dame like Indiana, you're not going on a run. You would have hit the buzzsaw at Georgia, or you'd have hit the buzzsaw at Penn State, or you'd have hit the buzzsaw in the Natty. I mean, you're just not built, like you're saying, to go on a 4-game run, a 4-game stretch where you're just worse than everybody, but somehow you're winning all the games. Like, again, to Harrison's point, that's not really how football goes.
It's not basketball. You can't get hot from 3. You can't be Butler and just shoot 3s so well that nobody can beat you. That's just not how football works. You actually have to have humans up front that are bigger, faster, and stronger than every other human on earth.
Absolutely. And just to throw this in there, Pappy Trappy with another one. They just need to stick to one deciding metric. Either you're doing the best or the most deserving. They go back and forth every year. Just stick to your decisions. There will always be backlash. I agree there. And I guess the issue, and this is where the debate comes in of who decides who's the most, the best 12, the best 4, or the most deserving 12 or the most deserving 4 is, who's deciding that. I don't trust the committee as is. Because we've seen there are sitting athletic directors. This year, the chairman was a Big Ten AD, and I think that showed there's a little bit of bias there. Now,
Ward
not
Manuel.
take credit away from not take credit away from Penn State and Ohio State. They stood on their business and they won. But should Indiana have gotten in over another conference's top team? There's always going to be that debate. But yeah, I agree. We need to figure out there needs to be criteria, and we need to stick by it year after year after year. Because like you said, not everyone's going to be happy. But right now, it seems like there are, placating to, as Kobe said, the casual fan, the NFL fan who doesn't give a rat's ass about college football until, December, January come around. You shouldn't be able to have a sitting AD. I think, and this is not new, they need to have people outside of the sport, not outside of the sport, but outside of the current day sport. Like, hey, go put Nick Saban on the damn, well, I guess he has a university job. Go find people who have their own credentials, who have played football, who have coached football, who have analyzed football for these years.
We've tried that before.
They have, and I guess they have. But they need to. We got to find something, all right? Because I don't.
What if you just let the coaches vote? Why don't I mean I know that they don't take their weekly coaches poll seriously, and I know that's where the pushback would come from is they don't take it seriously. But I think if you had the coaches vote on at the end and you were like, hey, listen, I don't know, maybe it could work. Have the actual coaches just say, give me your top 12.
Joe Long here with.
Go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was just going to read this out real quick. Joe Long with the potentially, I guess, hot take. Boise had 1 loss. Clemson had 3 losses. The BS Rural Conference bias. Boise deserved it more than the 3-loss conference winner.
I think you're missing the point here, Joe. I'm saying that neither of them deserve the bye. I'm saying that just because you're the conference champion of the Mountain West doesn't mean you should be the 3 seed and deserve the bye. I think you should be in the playoffs. In no world, I sat here and advocated 2 weeks ago. I thought Boise State should be in the playoffs, win or lose in their conference championship. But at some point, I don't think they should be the 3 seed sitting there on bye this weekend. Oregon, they looked really good, whatever against them. They still lost that game at Oregon. I just think the byes are going to be tricky. I think the way they drew them up this year, they've got to change them. I think they will change them. I think that's the most important thing. Like, we can sit here and argue about it, but I do think that will be the first thing that changes when they kind of look at it this offseason.
And I think the most unfortunate thing is that we're not going to lose teams. Once you allow the greedy-ass NCAA to get their hands on more money, they're never going to give back, right? NFL owners are never going to give back. You're never going to get away from those games. They're like, oh, you don't want the preseason games? We'll just make them regular season games, right? They didn't do away with games. So they're not going to do away with games. I think 8 was the perfect number. I don't know why we went from 4 to 12 and we didn't go to 8. I think 8 is the sweet spot. I think I don't think you'll ever see a team outside of 8 or 9 win the national championship. I just don't think that's going to ever happen. So I don't understand why we have 12 teams in when, those teams 9, 10, 11, 12 don't have a shot at winning. That's just stupid to me.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are trying to solve all the problems in college football, but as we find out, sometimes we're not listened to. A lot of the times we're not listened to. Like Kobe said earlier, I can't believe they're already talking about going to 16. Like, they were talking about going to 16 in the offseason before 12 even happened. Like, good God, can we find something and perfect it before we move on to the next thing? Because we're just kicking the can down the road in terms of problems when we just keep expanding the field in this area. Kobe, one more thing, and then we'll wrap up.
I know you want to wrap up, but I just want to say you can look at, to me, it's so easy. You just look at the FCS level. You just literally peek over the curtain and look at what's going on over there. I think they play like 32. I think through the first 2 rounds, I read that only there were only 2 upsets, maybe 3 upsets. The average margin of victory was 28.5 points by the higher seeds. That's what happens when you keep going farther and farther and farther back. I mean, sooner or later, you just can't keep up with the parity. I mean, I think there's more parity in college football than ever before right now. But when you start talking about 1-game seasons, they're just not a real chance at it.
In conclusion, we want competitive games in December. We don't want to watch a FCS team get blown out in December. That's not what we want. That's not what we're advocating for. We want what's best for college football. And what's best for college football is putting the best teams in and figuring out how to be consistent in how we do things in college football and not letting the casuals, I guess, dictate what we do. You don't see the NFL placating too much to the casuals, although we could have a whole nother show about the decisions we may not agree with over there in the NFL. But that's not what we do over here at the Top Dawg Talk podcast. We are a Georgia-centric show who now, with the college football playoff, we branch out a little bit. We give you a little bit more national. We are live 2 days a week, Sunday and Wednesday. If you're new here, make sure to like and subscribe. We have 2 awesome co-hosts in Dan Kiley and Kobe Piers. Tremendous show tonight, gentlemen. A lot of great talking points. We broke down every single first-round game tonight in just about under an hour and 20 minutes. One of our longer shows here recently. Just a reminder, we will not be live on Wednesday because it will be Christmas Day. Go enjoy that time with your family. Take a little break away from the college football world for a little bit. But make sure to enjoy your time. So Merry Christmas to everyone, everyone who's listening, everyone sitting at home. We appreciate you for being here. Go follow them at Dan Kiley 3, at Kobe Piers. You can see it here on the scrolling magical thing of words, how to find their Twitter apps. Make sure to like and subscribe to wherever you get the podcast. Rate us 5 stars. Hey, we may read the review here on the show. I haven't checked the reviews in a while, so I need to go do those. Thank you for joining us tonight. Dan, I have your cue right on time.
Merry Christmas, dogs.